Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Sandy Laycox, editor-in-chief of Leader's Edge. In this episode of our Personal Lines podcasts, our associate editor Chris Hand talks with Vinnie Hager, president of JGS Insurance in Homedale, New Jersey. One of the few insurance executives who graduated from college with a plan to enter the industry, Hager shares his experiences as a summer intern on Wall Street who saw a better life in insurance, as a soccer turned football turned rugby player, and as a charter boat captain. Give it a listen.
Vinnie, I'm pretty sure you're the first insurance executive that I've interviewed who was also a licensed charter boat captain.
Yeah.
So I want you to tell me about that. How did that happen? And what exactly does that mean? I think of charter boat as a fishing boat, but you tell me.
Well, charter boat just means that you can charge a fee, for, I could do tours, I could do, anytime I have somebody on the boat that I'm charging a fee for, I need a charter boat license in order to do that. And I did it really just to get knowledge. I had been boating for a number of years, and I knew the kind of local waterways, but there's a lot of things out there, that you don't know and that you should really get a good idea on. So my brother and I and a few of our friends all decided that we were going to take a course to become a charter to get what's called a 6-pack license, where I could have 6 people on board and charge a fee to do that. Okay. I've never done it. I've never charged a fee or done that. I just really did it to see how I could do it and get the knowledge of, when you're out there, you see all these different buoys and markers, and to kind of understand what it is you're looking at to give you a better kind of feel of the rules of the road, so to speak.
Okay. And we should mention you grew up in Homedale, right near the Jersey Shore. So obviously the Jersey Shore was a summertime destination. Tell me about your boating experience on the Jersey Shore. How are you mostly in the bay? Do you go out in the ocean? What do you do?
I would say I am 99% of the time in the bay. I have a place on Long Beach Island. We're right on the bay. And I started boating probably about 15 years ago, where I bought my first boat. When I went to the boat show, I convinced my wife. We had just bought this place on the water. And I said, we have to get a boat. We have to get a boat. And she's like, no, not this year. We're not getting a boat this year. Not this year. Not this year. So I said, okay, let's go to the Atlantic City boat show, and we'll go look at some wave runners. We can get a couple of wave runners. So I ended up walking out of there with a 29-foot cabin cruiser named Not This Year with the KNOT. And that's how we started boating. So I've had a number of boats down there, but for me, I'm a casual fisher. It was more for family events. So now I have a 30-foot center console. But we do water skiing and tubing and knee boarding and wakeboarding, and on occasion I'll just go down to the inlet and we'll go out and we'll do a little bit of fishing when the family's in town.
Tell me, we talked a little bit earlier, but you tell me a little bit about growing up in Homedale. You mentioned you were a soccer player turned football player turned rugby player.
Yep.
Ascending order of craziness, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah.
You tell me about that experience.
It was good. As I said, I was when I graduated 8th grade, I was one of the shortest people in the class. I think I was 4'11". I had been 4'11" for 4 years in a row. I hadn't grown at all. I kept saying to my mom, like, when am I going to grow? Like, when am I going to grow? And she kept saying, don't worry, you're between 8th grade and high school, you're going to grow. So at 8th grade, I was in the front row because they did it by height. Of graduation. I was in the front row, and I said, this better be my summer. And luckily it was. I grew 6 inches in 3 months. When I came back to high school, I was a different kid. I had filled out. I'd grown 6 inches. I went from 4'11" to 5'5". Wow. People didn't recognize me. And then when I was on the soccer team, the football coach, tapped me and brought me over, and he said, what are you doing over here? You're too big to play in this sport. You come play football. So I went and I ended up playing football for 4 years. When I went to college, I didn't play football in college, but on the first day of college, the kid in front of me was like, hey, why don't you come play rugby with me? And I had never played rugby before. And so I went and tried out for the rugby team, and I played rugby for a few years, which was a great experience, a very different sport, different game. So.
Okay. Let me ask you, growing up, your dad was in the business, it sounds like since you were very young.
Yep.
Um, what do you recall of what he did for work? Was it something he came home and talked about? Was it something you aspired to? How did what was the interaction about? What did
Uh, you know, insurance is just always something that we've always talked about because it's always been a big part of the family. I started working here in the agency when I was 14 or 15, I
wow.
think. I would come and work in the summers, for a summer job, I would work a couple hours a week here and there. Then my senior year in high school, I actually did like a co-op where I would, instead of taking elective classes in high school, I had a work program. So I went to school, I think until 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and I left and I worked in my dad's office from 1 to 5 every day, and I got credit for doing that. So I got paid to work for the 4 hours, but I also got credit in high school for doing that as a business class. So
So
uh,
you were learning the business. You weren't just cleaning bathrooms. You were learning the business, it sounds
I
like.
was learning the business. I remember when I first started out of college, we got this fancy computer thing that I had to I had to input all the data for all of the customers into the system because I had to one of the smarter things my mom forced all of me and my siblings to do was to learn how to type in high school. We always had to take a typing course because she could see the future with computers. So I was able to type very fast without looking and doing all that stuff. So one of my first jobs was to literally input every person and every customer that we had into this computer system. And later on, as we started to expand, I started to put in the different coverages so that it made me almost a technician early on, in the sense that I could tell you the difference between the CNA policy and the St. Paul policy and the companies that are out of business now, American Alliance and all these other companies. I could tell you the difference because I would put in the different limits for each of those different customers. So I was very young, but had some technical knowledge in the background. So that was really, as much of it as it was just data input, it really gave me a good basis of knowledge for the industry and the business. So
Wow. And was there an expectation that you would join the business?
no, when I went to Villanova, I was gonna go like everybody else at the time, in the 80s, I was gonna go work on Wall Street because that was what everybody did. So I spent my summers working at Solomon Brothers in the city. And after my second summer there, I was looking around, the stock market had crashed. The guy I was working with was divorced. Another guy across from me was divorced. The third guy should have been divorced or was on the way to getting divorced. They were there from 7 in the morning. I would leave at 7 o'clock at night and they would still be there. And, I started thinking, dad was home every night at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And, he got to travel a little bit here, maybe a couple times a year, and we had a very, middle class lifestyle growing up. My goal at the time was, I'll go work for Wall Street, make my fortune for 10 years, and then I'll retire and do the insurance thing. And then I pivoted to say, I'm just going to go into insurance. When my brother joined, he's like, hey, you got to make this commitment. Otherwise, my dad, dad's going to look to do something else. So I pivoted and started insurance right out of college. But I had worked in the business for years before that. So
I read where you described your job title as director of change.
yes.
Tell me what that means.
Well, I'm smart enough to know that I don't know it all, and that there are a lot of smarter people out there. So I am constantly asking questions. How do you do this? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? I have no problem taking other people's experience and adopting that, for ourselves to make us not have to go through the same mistakes. So whenever I went to these meetings or whenever I go to any of these networking meetings, I always come back with something, like one or two things, and I'm going to say, okay, we're going to make this change, we're going to make that change. And sometimes my people didn't really appreciate it when I went to those things, so they knew something was going to change when I came back. But for the most part, I think it had really kept us ahead of our competition and what was going on in the marketplace. So that's I am open to other people's suggestions. Listen, I'm not the I'm not the one sitting in front of the computer entering all this information into our agency management system. If there's a better way and a more efficient way, I'm open, I'm all ears. What's going to make you more effective will make us all better. So let's have those conversations and continue to do that and continue to make those adjustments. You can't just stay stagnant. You have to constantly be changing. Otherwise, we get left behind.
With that in mind, as long as we're on the subject of change, I wanted to ask if you could change one thing about the insurance industry, what would it be?
We do a terrible job of identifying all the different opportunities within this industry to college age students, or the industry or other people in general. You know, when you talk to anyone in college and you mention insurance, you hear Geico, you hear Flo from Progressive, you hear the Farmer's Guy, you know, all of those personal line things. But when you start to talk about, you know, what do you really enjoy? Oh, what are the companies that you most admire? I like Google. Oh, I like Twitter. Well, you know, they need insurance too, right? And they need more and different insurance, and they're looking to advisors. You know, if you like, I have a producer here who used to race motorcycles. He really enjoyed racing motorcycles, and he went around and wrote all the racetracks and on all the teams that were racing around them. So if it's something you really enjoy, you can specialize and do that and really build a niche and get known. And you know, you name any degree in college and there is a place for them in the insurance industry, from engineering and the loss control side to auditors to legal counsel. You know, basically graduate with a degree and you'll find a place in the insurance industry. I'm one of the few. When you go to these meetings and people raise, you know, they ask you to raise your hand, how many people graduated college with the intent of going to the insurance industry? I'm one of the 10%. Everybody else couldn't get a job in whatever field they wanted to, took the job in insurance, liked it, and ended up staying there. That's usually what you hear. So I think if we do a better job, we will have a better opportunity of recruiting. You know, as you know, we've got 450,000 baby boomers in our industry retiring over the next 5 years, and there's not a lot of people behind there to fill those spaces. So the opportunity within the industry is huge.
Vinnie, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
That was Chris Hand talking with Vinnie Hager of JGS Insurance. I hope you enjoyed their conversation. Check out the rest of our Personal Lines podcasts at leadersedge.com.